Hello, welcome back. I did not expect this to be so soon, but here we are. Um, I had no idea this was actually this short. I did not realize this because I had downloaded the book on my Kindle and it said it was about 144 pages, roughly the same as year one was. So I was expecting to probably have a week or two to read this. And turns out that the book that we're about to talk about actually carries a couple of runs from the Detective Comics era to package in within the deluxe edition of the book, um, because this is apparently a one-shot comic, so it's just one release and done. Not like with other runs where it's multiple issues, week by week sort of thing. This was just one comic, and that was it. So really, it's about like 70 pages, about half of that. Um, but I just got done with it, and now we can talk about it. So I decided to continue my readings of the Batman, and this is where most have said to go next after you've read year one, and I absolutely understand why upon now reading it. So, so what we're going to talk about briefly, probably, is The Man Who Laughs. This was released in 2005, I believe. And I believe, I just got to remember his name, written by Ed Brubaker, drawn by Doug Monick. I think that's how you say his name. Um, yeah, this was released in February 2005, according to the Wikipedia page. And as the story is, this is following largely actually from what year one was. According to the Wikipedia page, it actually directly follows from, I believe, what is it called? Batman and the Mo Monk. I think that's what it's called. Just so I can make sure I got all my facts straight here. Um, Batman and the Mad Monk. That's what I meant to say. So it follows from that ending specifically, um, but it is taking place within the year one continuity. Is meant to act as a successor to the year one comic. And as the story goes, we follow the beginning, James Gordon, as he is uncovering a bunch of corpses. It starts off in kind of a grotesque and disturbing type of way, with all these dead, all these corpses lying around in a basement with a bunch of smiles on their face. And Batman, of course, gets involved and works with James, and they find out very quickly that people are becoming infected by a certain kind of poison that is either administered into them already or is something that makes contact with them at some points within other victims of the story by a new criminal that is now taking the streets, which the public gives him the name in the form of the Joker. And this starts off being at least by this specific comic, what they're looking to tell, is the first encounters of Batman and the Joker, and how Bruce deals with this new type of criminal, because he's at this point dealt with, you know, specific types, that of like gang members and, uh, as he says in the book, rapists and other types of people here and there, serial killers, but he's never faced a foe like this before, and Bruce is now tested into seeing how he may deal with a more formidable opponent in the form of the Joker. So, so yeah, I was really surprised actually how much this actually really links up with year one. There's, when the books actually starts, it actually has a little bit of a almost like, hey, this is the year one continuity, with a newspaper showing Commissioner Loeb and all the things that happened to him there. I believe him formally retiring, as they kind of alluded to in the year one comic. So tells you right up front that this is in fact the year one universe, and that it is following from that. Um, with some changes along the way. Batman in this now wears the blue cowl, whereas in the year one comic he was wearing the tradition, the more the black cowl. Um, but it definitely has more energy than what the year one comic had. With the year one comic, it was a lot more laid out and a lot more interested in a thematic study, in that it was more concerning itself of on the tale of corruption and the tale of um, of two perspectives on that. One operating in the law while the other is operating outside the law. With The Man Who Laughs, I would say that if there is anything to a thematic understanding of the book, it would be more of the, I guess you could say, the exploitation of said corruption. Where the Joker's victims mostly are that of rich and powerful individuals, and he is making a point on that. Uh, trying to present that of the corruption, either that being from, these wealthy individuals and, what they stand for. But more importantly, as we find out throughout the story, it is a personal vendetta. It is the Joker enacting revenge because of everything that has happened to him, quite literally to how he looks. And there is the suggestion that perhaps he was a a different kind of person before taking on the Joker persona, within the idea of the Red Hood concept. This idea of Batman fighting a criminal a few months back who has just like this red hood, with the cape and everything like that. Obviously, if you also know your comics, there's the Red Hood character, Jason Todd and everything like that, which, I'm pretty sure in terms of the comics, I'm pretty sure that the Red Hood persona is kind of taken from what Joker originally was, at least the suggestion to what Joker originally was. Because I like also that it's never confirmed. It's a suspicion. And there is that things line up, but it's never 100% confirmed through a document or through a filing. Because the Joker also does, because the Joker, despite being psychotic, he is also very, very intelligent and he's very smart. And he's covered his tracks. He's made sure that nobody's going to find out who he truly is. He has a clean slate. And, in that he is, also probably more motivated to do the things that he does. Um, but for a story, I mean, generally that's what I get from the story. But I think that is also kind of stretching to some extent, because it is pretty much, if I were to like put it in like a genre per se, in terms of like a movie language, it would be like an action film. It's basically just a collection of like stuff that happens, with the Joker doing all the terror that he does to Gotham, killing people left and right. Um, and the Batman ultimately has to step in and stop him. It's, essentially the basis of what is happening. The underpinning, the layering to that is, pretty thin. I think that the Year One comic deals with more than what the Man Who Laughs does. But for entertainment value, I think that there is more to be found here. Year One I think is more thematically interesting, and I think it carries more significance. And just generally, I think by comic, I think that Year One stands better than what the Man Who Laughs is. But I think that for general just entertainment, I think that the Man Who Laughs wins out, and there's just more fun. There's also, I think, to some extent more of a utilization of Batman than what the Year One comic does. You actually see him being that of a detective. You see him also being like scientific. He's like learning, doing like chemicals and creating antidotes and stuff like that. Because people forget that the original comic, detective comic from Batman, he was actually also a scientist. He strived to be a scientist and then became the Batman persona. I'll leave it here where the original print. I actually have the at least like a Batman, what is it, collection. I didn't even know I had it or really cared to look at it, but I guess it has one of the original pages from that original comic that introduced the Batman way back in the day, like in the 40s, and it shows that Bruce actually was striving to be that of a scientist. Back before he became the Batman persona. At least to my memory, I think that's how it went. So it's kind of neat to also see that. But and I also got to say I really like that moment in the story, The Man Who Laughs, where Bruce takes the poison not only to get out of his situation, but also it gives him the insight that he needs to understand his opponent and to also be able to understand his motives. Like it helps him because he's trying desperately to figure out what his deal is, but he's not given any room really to breathe. So he confronts that head on by taking the poison, and it allows him to fall into that madness temporarily so that he can understand, how this person actually moves and how he is motivated, and ultimately finds his way to take him down. But and I like the little things that come to fruition. Little things that we didn't see in year one. The Batmobile, we have the Bat Signal. And like I said, in a little bit of a different costume now. He's got the blue cowl going on, which looks cool. Um, but I think that it is I think that year one is still superior because it has a lot more going on. I think in terms of story, this is purely, I think, like I said, purely more of in the vein of entertainment. It is just more or less just action beats happening here or there, with the subtle subtext of perhaps exploitation and corruption, but it's subtle, and it might be just me looking for some kind of some kind of theme. But year one is superior because it clearly has that theme. It clearly has a point to having these two perspectives play. So it's not to say that I hate The Man Who Laughs. I mean, it kind of acts like an episode. If like you're watching like the animated series, like kind of has like that spirit where it just feels like an episode you're reading. Um, it was an enjoyable episode, but I think that in terms of just my overall, or in terms of just having more to say, having more of a thematic understanding, getting me more enamored in the story, I think that year one is more superior, even if it is in some cases shallow. Um, but The Man Who Laughs, I mean, I think that it's an interesting introduction to the Joker character. Um, it's I think that my gripes would be that I wish that it wasn't, um, like there's little things that the story does to kind of move things along. Like I don't think the Joker would just kind of leave those maps on the table like that he does. I just don't think he would have done that. I also don't think that, um, because he's psychotic, but within that psychotic nature, he's doing it for either to to just to do it, or he's doing it because he's trying to throw off the scent. He's not trying to invite people in, at least if he really, really wants to, sure. He's a very unpredictable character. So for the story to have some kind of predictability within his motivations and to basically give Batman some kind of entry point, I feel like it is a little convenient. I do think that the point of him taking the poison, though, at Bruce, I thought that was actually really cool, but I just felt like we didn't really need him to, like, I get why we needed to because it does ultimately put everything in perspective for Bruce, but I just feel like the character of Joker wouldn't necessarily have left those there. I mean, if he burned all of those documents, supposedly from the Ace Chemical plant. I don't know why he would, leave those papers in that building. He would have probably torched that building as well. Um, little things like that I feel are just kind of conveniences just to get the plot moving. Um, but generally, I mean, it's an entertaining read. I mean, I won't say it's bad. I just think that it is, yeah, it's not completely fleshed out. And, I think it's just the nature of maybe the one shot comic type thing. Um, but generally, it's fun. Visually, it looks nice. But I think that by overall weight, by overall theme, I think that it's lacking in a little bit of that purpose. It feels more there in the vein of like, I would say schlock, but just like more in the vein of, like I said, entertainment than actual care of depth and development of said characters. So there is stuff there to understand about them, and you do get a sense of who these people are. Bruce, Joker, you get a sense of who these characters are in the story. But I just think that the the depth to them can be rather hollow. And in the case of what the Joker is, hollow shouldn't really be the case when we're talking about the Joker. So, so yeah, I enjoyed the book. I thought it was a neat read. I might read the Detective Comics stuff later, but we'll see where I end up next with my reads. I didn't expect this to be done so soon, so we'll see where I end up next with my with my next few reads down the line. So we'll see. But you guys know your thoughts on The Man Who Laughs if you guys have read it. And I'm pretty sure the next thing would be The Long Halloween. I'm pretty sure that's where I would have to go next. So we'll see if I end up there next or if I go either back to Superman, because I've been kind of curious to go back to Superman, um, or follow up with my Wonder Woman reads. We'll see where we end up going. But let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below. And that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye.